more from Brian Flores, the former Miami Dolphins head coach who is suing the NFL over allegations of racism and discriminatory hiring practices. He said he knows this lawsuit could hurt his future in the NFL.
I love coaching. I do. It's something that I'm passionate about. It brings me joy. And I love helping young people reach their potential and become the best versions of themselves. I'm gifted to do that.
Brian.
But this is bigger than that.
Flores claims the league's Rooney Rule, intended to give minorities an opportunity at head coaching and front office positions, has turned into a practice of interviewing black candidates just to check a box. He says his interview with the New York Giants was a sham and the job was already promised to another person, something he claims he learned in a text from Patriots head coach Bill Belichick, who reportedly sent that text to Flores by mistake. Flores also says he turned down money from the owner of the Miami Dolphins to lose games in order to get a better draft pick, and he believes that's why he was ultimately fired. Dr. Sean Fletcher, professor of public relations and sport communication at San Jose State University, says it has been a poorly kept secret that the NFL struggles with diversity from the top of the organization to the bottom. And Fletcher says he used to work with the Washington Commanders in football personnel years ago in their scouting division.
I saw firsthand many of the situations that young upstart black and brown coaches found themselves in trying to break through. And they had to jump through so many hoops unnecessarily. And professional sport is so oftentimes viewed and positioned as a meritocracy, where if you work hard, you should reap the benefits on all different levels, as a player, as a coach, as front office personnel, so on and so forth. But it typically stops. And what we've seen over decades, specifically within the NFL, play out is that you can work as hard as they say you're supposed to work and do everything you're supposed to do with diligence and grit and hard work, and you'll be blocked. And you'll find yourself tokenized. I've seen it firsthand, to where young upstart black and brown assistant coaches ended up being coaxed into taking these Rooney Rule-esque interviews when either they were not qualified for it, or they simply were not even interested in a head coaching position, but yet they did the ownership a favor and they took an interview and they checked the Rooney Rule box. Since that was enacted in 2003, of the 130 head coaching vacancies that have been open since then, only 15 have been filled by black head coaches.
What do you think this NFL lawsuit will bring about? Will we see change? What's going to have to happen so that Neil does move?
Well, my hope is that we will see change. My hope is that we will see measurable change. Of the number of pure motive intentions that Brian Flores mentioned in his interviews as to why he even moved this class action lawsuit forward, one of them he mentioned was to impact the hearts and minds of leaders who make these hiring decisions. That's where he and I somewhat diverge in terms of thinking, because I've been around leaders within professional sport, and hearts and minds is usually the least that can be legislated and adjudicated. Many are set in their ways, not all, but many are set in their ways. And the things that motivate and move them are not emotional. They are quantifiable. They are numerical. They are things that ultimately are going to impact the bottom line, that are going to impact fandom, sponsorship, merchandising, ticket sales, so on and so forth. That's what moves these leaders of these organizations who have heavily somewhat fortified themselves from being moved out. We have never seen a majority owner of an NFL franchise who's black. We've never seen that. We've only had one black team president in the 100 years that the NFL has been in existence. So the upper brass of the NFL power structure is heavily fortified So I think we're going to have to start seeing some transparency, some objectivity in terms of metrics and measurements that are used in order to hire and bring in diverse candidates. No longer can it be left to subjectivity. I think that's where what continues to get us into trouble, to where the smoke-filled back rooms, to where after things like the Rooney Rule have already been checked off the list, and you go into these private conversations and it becomes a gut feel conversation. And that's where bias enters into. That's where familiarity bias enters into it. Comfort level, who's a good fit. And when you start talking about who's a good fit, usually it comes down to subjective measures of, am I familiar with you? Do we have similar backgrounds and upbringings? Can we converse about similar things? And the unfortunate part about diversity and inclusion conversations is that shouldn't be so. I should be hired because I'm qualified and I'm the right person for it. And when we move into those subjective measures, until we do have a more inclusive workforce, typically those who are of historically marginalized and disenfranchised communities will not be the comfort fit for the upper brass in these leagues. So we have to start moving towards more inclusive, more objective measures in order to start seeing some change.
Fletcher said NBA Commissioner Adam Silver has taken a progressive stance and done a really good job in comparison to other league commissioners, but he said there is still a long way to go with every professional sport team.
Well, in the midst of our housing crisis, more than